Welcome to the Intelligence Briefing Live What's the Buzz, where leaders and hands-on experts share how they have turned hype into outcome. Today we'll talk about how you can build generative AI applications with open source tech. And who better to talk about it than someone who's actively working on that, Tobias Zwingmann. Hey Tobias, thanks for joining.
Hey Andreas, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. Hey, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tobias. I'm based in Hanover in Germany. And I run my own business, Rapid AI, essentially a AI consultancy helping businesses to grow with AI. So I help companies from the beginning of figuring out what AI is and what AI can do for them up to the implementation side of things and also building projects and implementing them hands-on with different technologies. And been doing that for quite a while now and quite happy with it. So that's my background. And maybe I'm actively on LinkedIn and writing. I've written my first book last year with 𝗟𝗏, AI-powered business intelligence. That's the book title. Has been written before 𝗪GPT came out, though. So, but I'm already working on the next one, so that I can tell. And I'm also writing a newsletter. It's called AI for Business Growth. And you can subscribe to the newsletter on AI4BI.rocks. That's the newsletter I'm writing.
That's awesome. And I've been a subscriber for a while, and I really enjoy reading all the nuggets and details that you share of how you can go from an idea to an implementation. It was one of the main reasons why I reached out to you and invited you to the show. So
So cool.
Thanks for being on. Awesome. Hey, for those of you in the audience, if you're just joining the stream, drop a comment in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm curious how global our audience is again today, and I'm always amazed seeing where you're joining us from. So also don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter, the AI Memo, under intelligence-briefing.com/newsletter. So you can stay up to date how you can successfully lead AI projects in your business. So, but with that out of the way, Tobias, should we play a little game to kick things off?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's see. This game is called In Your Own Words. And when I hit the buzzer, the wheels will start spinning. And when they stop, you'll see a sentence. I'd like you to answer with the first thing that comes to mind and why, in your own words. So, to make it a little more interesting, you'll only have 60 seconds for your answer. Now, are you ready for What's the Buzz?
I hope so. Let's go.
Perfect. And for those of you in the audience, also drop your answer in the chat and why. Curious to see what you come up with. So, here we go. If AI were a song, what would it be? 60 seconds on the clock. Go.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. The first one that comes to mind is Zombie Nation. I don't know why, but that's kind of the soundtrack I associate with AI somehow. A little bit weird, but also very straightforward in a way. So,
well, I think in a way, AI has been deemed dead many times, right? With all the AI winters and
it's
still
always coming
emerges
back.
again and
Always
again.
coming
Right?
back. Yeah.
So yeah, awesome. Well, thank you. That was really on the fly and a great answer. Perfect. I'm taking a look at the chat, and I'm seeing folks join from all over the place. So that's really exciting. From Amsterdam in the Netherlands to India to Toronto in Canada, North Carolina in the US, Sweden. So really awesome. Thank you for joining. So why don't we talk a bit about the actual topic of our episode today? And obviously, there's a lot of buzz and hype around generative AI, and it's been almost a year since we've seen ChatGPT come onto stage and in the industry landscape, if you will. But I'm curious, what new use cases do you see that generative AI enables, or what certain categories do you see, and maybe some examples that you can share from them?
Yeah, sure. So, I work mostly with B2B companies, and with them, especially in the realms of departments like sales, marketing, customer support. And in these areas, I see I would say four super categories of use cases that generate an AI either enables because it's completely new, or it enables those because it's just cheaper to do those now than before. And the first super category that I call is what I call it is summarization and extension. So given you have a large text, it could be a large sales document or it could be a large information from your company. It's very easy to summarize that down and just extract some certain key points or highlight. And on the other hand side, it's also very easily possible to extract things or to expand things. And that's as easy as starting with a very very, very broad or high-level marketing idea, and then expanding that into into an outline, and then expanding that outline into actual content, and then going from a very tiny piece of information to a very long thing. And again, this could be anything. It could be a sales transcript, it could be a marketing strategy, it could be anything that we associate normally with a knowledge work. So that's the first big category that I see. The second one is search and knowledge retrieval. And this is especially important in customer chatbots or customer support chatbots, where I do some projects in. So where you have all that knowledge available of how to deal with certain support issues, acquire requests that customers bring in, and you just have to match that piece of information with the question that the customer is asking in the chatbot, for example. So that's the second big use case. And then the third one is digital asset creation. And especially with multimodality now in generative AI, this is a very, very important topic. So to generate different types of digital content, like video, images, audio, and obviously also text. So that's especially in sales and marketing, a very important topic. And then finally, coding. And we don't actually see coding so much in sales in terms of we want to code something, but where I do see it a lot is in analytics. So when we analyze data, coming from different customer touch points or from different tools, CRM tools or analytics tools that we use. Before it was really hard to analyze these things, and now with the help of LLMs and code, it's very easy to translate queries into natural language queries into SQL queries, or into code, Python code that finds the top selling products in the database or whatever. So it's very easy to make those bridges. And these are kind of the four super categories that I see where most use cases that I work with fall into.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. I think it helps thinking along those lines and just seeing what is possible using that new technology. Right? And to your point, not everything is brand new in many things, or in many ways it also helps us do things better than we've been able to do them before, and more.
Yeah, and maybe to give you one concrete example of that, we're currently working on a chatbot project, which actually has already existed in that company for the past couple of years. But the new thing with generative AI now is that it's much cheaper to run that chatbot. So before, that chatbot essentially consisted of some kind of AI, but also a very handcrafted rule system in the back end of when to pull what kind of information. And that costed immense sums per year to maintain that chatbot at a good quality level. And now with Gen AI, it's just possible to deliver the same experience at just a fraction of the cost. And I mean, we're still talking about GPT-4 access here, so the expensive version of the model, but still it's much cheaper than compared to the old approach where you had all these kind of manual tasks and maintenance there involved. So I think that's a great use case. Even though it's not completely new, it just works as well out of the box as previously, but just as a much lower cost aspect.
Look, I remember when I try to get in touch with my cable provider or some of the retailers when you order something, and they're not yet on that latest technology. It gets really, really frustrating because you sometimes end up in this infinite loop of, is this what you mean? Or here are the 3 things that I can help you with. And you say, hey, it's actually number 4 or 5 that I need. That's not on your list. Agent, right? Connect me to a real person.
Absolutely.
I think there's a huge value if that is more natural, or is able to understand better what you're looking for. A great example. Yeah? By the way, for those of you in the audience, if you do have a question for Tobias, feel free to post it in the chat, and we'll pick that up in a few minutes. Now, look, when we talk about these kinds of use cases or 4 big areas where generative AI can help, I think on one hand, we see the likes of commercial providers making large language models available. On the other hand, there's a big debate about going open source for transparency, quality. They're just as good, maybe not quite as expensive. When would you say should somebody use off-the-shelf generative AI compared to open source? What are some of the decisions that people should think about, and some of the criteria you see?
So for off-the-shelf solutions, there are like two major advantages that I see right now. The first advantage is it's super fast to access these services. You literally, just have everything is just one API call away, or maybe there's even already a product or software, that is, catering to that kind of use case, which you already have in mind. Because again, like, those use cases often come back down to the similar topics or similar categories. So it's fast. And the second one is, it's cheap, at least at the beginning, because, it's very often usage based. And this, is very good for building, fast prototypes, for validating ideas, for building the first proof of concept. You can probably, with generative AI and off-the-shelf services, or generally AI services, you can probably go to like, the 70, maybe sometimes 80% of an application really, really fast within a couple of days. So personally, when I do consulting projects, I follow that 20-20 rule, where I say, the first prototype shouldn't take longer than 20 days and it shouldn't cost more than $20,000. So this is like, what you can very much like easily do with off-the-shelf services. But at the same time, at some point there's a kind of that tipping point where you need to figure out, okay, is that really the right way to go in the long run? And if you validated a concept or if you validated an idea, then sometimes it might be a good choice, to switch over to open source technology and just building a more customized stack. We can talk about open source in a bit. Just one thought, for for off the shelf services, which I currently see is that especially the enterprises tend to use off-the-shelf services, just because everything is so new and everything is just, in enterprises, you need that kind of like security and privacy in terms of, okay, data security, but also security and safety in terms of maintaining the solution. And, it's sometimes very hard to like reason in an internal IT department to use this or that GitHub repository, which has, just been released like, 2 months ago to run any, full-scale productive application on that. So that's, why a lot of companies also like fall back to these off-the-shelf or enterprise services from professional vendors.
I think that's a great point, right? So basically take into account the full calculation, not just look at the cost of inference or of fine-tuning, if you will, but also to operate it, and do you have the skills, or can you get access to the skills to build it and to maintain it? I think that's an important consideration that you're pointing out. Yeah. So, with that thought of, sure, there's open source, there's off the shelf. What would you say in terms of quality, right? I think there are a number of benchmarks, there are a number of models that are being benchmarked against these. How comparable are these two types of commercial models, if you will, between commercially available and open source, or proprietary and open source?
Yeah. I mean, so far, and like we have just seen that yesterday, for the big OpenAI demo day. So far, GPT-4 still is the leading large language model out there in the world. Like, there's no other model. I wouldn't even say not even any other commercial model, but at least no open source model which can compete with GPT-4 in like all aspects. There are certain types of LLMs that provide a similar capability or similar performance on different specific use cases, tasks, like if you want to do a sentiment analysis or classify text into different categories, like very niche categories. But on that broad and universal scale, GPT-4 still has the highest what we call cognitive abilities, and also the highest alignment and being able to follow what the instructions that are given in the prompt. So in that sense, I think they are still ahead, but at the same time, we do see that open source is catching up. They are also moving at an incredible pace, and yeah, we will see how far it goes. But at least for now, I still see their commercial models, and especially GPT-4 there on the edge. Everyone's trying to beat it, and I haven't seen a model that is really able to outperform GPT-4 in all aspects.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that perspective. Now, I mean, with off-the-shelf software and capabilities, right, you can get pretty far. Maybe to some extent, you get everything out of the box, or depending on what you're looking to do. Say, take something like GPT-4. Sure, you can prompt it and you can get some good results or some excellent results depending on what you're looking for. But then on the other side, there's also this point around hallucination, or giving it more context so the information is more relevant to what you're trying to create and to generate. What components do you see are needed to set up and train and overall use open source LLMs then on the other hand?
Yeah, so I think like when we consume an LLM, as an API or as an endpoint, there's much more going on than just the raw inference. Like there are lots of nuts and buttons around there that help to make the model safe, to align that model, also to make sure that we have threading limits, that we like are able to scale the model up and down depending on the usage. So like there are lots of like infrastructural components to it. But also at the same time, that takes away some flexibility from us if we want to build something with that. And especially in terms of GPT-4, that directly translates into cost. So GPT-4 is fine if you use those augmented use cases where you don't have that many requests to the model going there. But as soon as you enter those more like automated and highly integrated use cases, your OpenAI build can accelerate quickly. Pretty fast, and that is normally the point where I say, hey, let's take a look if there's any open source solution that helps you to tackle the exact problem that you want to do. So I give you an example. So there was this use case recently where we had survey data coming in from an event organizer, just asking their the feedback survey after the event, and we wanted to classify open text feedbacks from that feedback survey into different categories. So GPT-4 can do that super easily. Was pretty good. We also didn't have any kind of hallucinations because like within the prompt we provided the categories and the LLM had only to match, the text input with those categories. So that worked pretty well. But if we just repeat that over and over again, like, for all events, the sum quite, adds up for, especially if you pass that for every survey response. So in that case, sometimes it might be even better to use a open source model like Llama 2 and trying to fine tune it on that particular task of saying, okay, here we want to do that classification task on the text, and now we already have that kind of training data available because that's what we did with GPT-4 right now. And we can now use that data as a training input to try to get Llama 2 in this case on a similar performance level as GPT-4, and then hopefully have some advantages in the overall cost calculation. Because also, I mean, make no mistake, like Llama 2, like hosting a model like Llama 2 doesn't come like for free. You still have to host it somewhere. You still have to have GPU power and everything associated. So it's not like, okay, like GPT-4 costs us X and Llama 2 is free of charge. So you still have to have the whole infrastructure built and so considered. But at least you can make a definite decision. If someone asks you, okay, well, why are we paying so much for that model? Isn't there any other way? We can say, okay, we have looked into that, and like here's the result, and that's why we're doing it this way that we are doing it. So yeah, and I think this is like important, and also this is how I see it, how you can transition from off the shelf to more customized models by trying to fine tune and trying to adapt models that cater to a more specific task. Because what you do with those big LLMs is, to take a general purpose capability and throw it as a very specific problem. And in many cases, it can do that pretty well. But again, it's literally throwing a lot of computational power at oftentimes a very small problem. So, and at some point, it might be better to just take a smaller or more effective model and just apply those to these more specific and niche use cases.
Awesome. I think great point about the cost. Again, it doesn't come for free. It might be cheaper, but maybe there are also other components to take into account. And just taking a look at the chat, and I see Michael basically confirms what you're saying. Open source software generative AI provides a viable alternative based on the costs and the political acceptance. I see a question from Willy here. Maybe you can speak to that. And Willy is asking, how do you assess the relevance of European models such as Aleph Alpha Luminous for companies affected by the GDPR, especially considering that Azure services are now running on European servers? In general, are we in danger of becoming dependent on the one big model, GPT-4?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I mean, honestly, I would love to see that European model being, being developed and being hosted here. And I think LF just had another like 500 million Series B round recently. So, things are going into the right directions. But on the other hand side, if you just look at what scale companies like OpenAI are operating, and especially, at what speed they are innovating, I really doubt if we can compete with that. For example, I'll give you an example. Like most of those benchmarks, including a lot of European models, compare themselves still with GPT 3.5 performance and say, "Hey, we can beat GPT 3.5." But the thing is, like GPT 3.5 is like literally available like free of charge within ChatGPT and very low cost in the API. So that's not really the benchmark. The benchmark is GPT-4. And whenever you compare that to GPT-4, I really wonder if it's such a clever decision to try to build the next GPT-4 like from Europe. Like maybe we should invest the kind of like fragmented resources that we have in Europe, because like there's not a single player, there are multiple players. Maybe we should rather invest that into more specific models that are probably catering specific industries or specific use cases or so. Honestly, I don't believe that the next big foundational model, that outperforms everything else will come from Europe. That's, at least not how I see it currently. There might be still great use cases, but as Willy says here, everything that revolves around GDPR and security and privacy, like these things will be just solved just as we did that with cloud computing, like a decade ago. Everyone then, thought, oh, we can't just give our data to one of the big 3 cloud providers, right? And like, here we are. So I think this is a very similar development happening here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for taking that one. And I see there's another one from 𝗀𝗧cie𝗂𝗶𝘴𝗺 here in the chat as well. And maybe if I can rephrase that a bit, it's right with GPT-4. There's already a relatively cost-effective model available with high performance that comes out at the top of all these benchmarks. But what are our considerations for using open source? Is it really about the confidential data that you really don't want to send to those providers, even if they don't use them for training? Or what are some other considerations that you see there to go open source?
Yeah, and maybe to answer this question, maybe we have to zoom out a little bit, because so far we just talked about open source LLMs. But in fact, I think when we look at the open source ecosystem, there is more than just the open source LLMs. So I see 3 different layers. So we have the LLM layer, right, where we have commercial, models like GPT-4 and others, and we have open source models like, Llama 2 and Flan and so on. But then there's also kind of this middle or, tooling layer where we have tools like LangChain, like Llama Index, where we have things like Hugging Face, for fine-tuning models. And I think this is, where most things are happening right now, like where people are using these open source, this open source tool stack to build very, very customized applications. And then we have a third layer, which is even abstracting even more, where you have not only like the tool stack, but also like the whole front end component stacked on top of that. Like these are tools like Vercel AI, for example. Microsoft also putting out some repositories that help you like create a ChatGPT-like interface or setting up the RAG architecture and things like that. And I think this whole ecosystem is what makes these kind of use cases thrive at the moment, especially if you want to have more customizability. And I'll give you an example. Like yesterday was that OpenAI demo day, and they introduced the capability of building these custom GPTs, where you essentially get like the RAG architecture with knowledge retrieval out of the box, using the new these new GPT custom GPT models. And one could say, well, why do we need this whole RAG ecosystem then? If we can just get it out of the box from OpenAI. And the answer to that is, because there are lots of use cases which need a much more higher customization. For example, one customer I currently work with, they have the challenge of handling permission levels, of what kind of user in the chat within an enterprise can access what kind of information from the knowledge graph behind that. And ideally, they want to inherit that, from, for example, the Azure directory or from their SharePoint, so that if a user asks a question to the chatbot, they don't get like the full like access to all the knowledge in the company, but only to those aspects where their current user account has access to. And if you want to build something like this, then you're very like quickly in those like more customized developments. And in these cases, like really tools like LangChain and things like that are really, really cool to build these kind of functionalities and features really quickly. And this is where I like do see the most potential and development in this whole LLM ecosystem to happen, at least in the short term, because this is really democratizing LLM development.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this episode so far. And I was wondering if you can summarize the top 3 takeaways for the audience today from our discussion.
Yeah, so I think like at the beginning, I would not overthink the whole topic with, should I use off the shelf or open source? Should I do it myself? I think go with whatever, looks or is more natural for you. Like if you're the tech guy, if you're a developer and you totally, feel like you can build that by yourself, just like implementing the next LangChain, okay, just go with that, build something for you. But I think in most cases, especially enterprise cases, you're probably better off using an off-the-shelf service at the beginning in order to get started and figure out not A, if the tech works, but B, if it's actually valuable what you're building. So, I would always focus on this. And the second takeaway, I would take away from today is that it's not only, as we said, about inference costs when you make the whole cost equation, but also what other kind of like hidden costs are associated with that. Like this is not only running the model, and the infrastructure cost, but let's say like your medium-sized business, maybe you have a small engineering team, maybe you have one guy, knowing how to operate or to build stuff in LangChain, and helping you to build those internal chatbots that you're currently building. What happens is that guy is leaving tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, right? Like who can fill that gap? And if you still have resources to fill that gap really quickly, then that's fine. If not, then just be aware that this is all really, really cutting edge technology. And it's not like, there's a huge labor market out there, like, JavaScript people waiting to build something for you with that. It's really, really at the edge, and it takes a lot of time often to find people who have done that before, and also build productive applications and not only build a small Jupyter notebook prototype. So yeah, I think these were the key things I would just summarize from here.
It's awesome. Thank you so much. So look, we're getting close to the end of the show today. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your expertise with us. I think it was a very insightful discussion and conversation, ranging from off-the-shelf to open source technologies, when to use what are some of the upsides, some of the downsides of doing that. And I really appreciate you spending your time with us.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Thanks for hosting me.
Great. Thank you in the audience as well. And see you next time for another round of the Intelligence Briefing Live. What's the buzz? Bye-bye.